A hand reached for the flag-draped casket, a cold command to divert the hero's final journey. But for the tomb guard, this was a sacred line, a promise sealed in combat, a confrontation that would silence an entire airport. In the chaotic heart of the international terminal, Sergeant Leo Hayes was an island of perfect stillness. While thousands of travelers swirled around him in a frantic dance of rolling suitcases and anxious glances at departure boards, he remained fixed, a living monument in the uniform of the old guard. The crisp black fabric, adorned with scarlet trim and gleaming metals, was not merely clothing. It was a covenant. His white gloves were immaculate, his shoes polished to a black mirror, and on his chest, the tomb guard identification badge shone with a quiet, profound authority. At 30, his face was sharp and composed, his gaze locked forward, but beneath the stoic exterior, a weight of personal duty pressed down, heavier than any ceremonial rifle. Today, his vigil was not at Arlington's hallowed tomb. It was here, in this temple of noise and haste, to escort a brother home. The name echoed in his mind, a silent drumbeat against the terminal's cacophony. Corporal Liam Carter, 24 years old, gone, killed in a classified operation deep in the rugged mountains of a forgotten conflict zone. The official report was sanitized, clinical, but Leo knew the truth of the man. Liam, who could quote classic rock lyrics for any situation, who dreamed of restoring a '69 Mustang he'd bought for scrap, who had a laugh that could cut through the thickest tension in a barracks, and who, under a sky full of unfamiliar stars, had made Leo a promise. "If I don't make it back, Leo," he'd said, his usual grin replaced by a rare moment of gravity. "Bring me home right. Don't let them sneak me in the back door." 3 days ago, that promise had been called due. Now, Liam's casket was waiting on the tarmac, and Leo would not fail him. Every perfectly measured step he would take through this concourse was for Liam, for the boy who'd left behind a dog-eared copy of On the Road and a half-finished engine rebuild, for the soldier who had died pulling his fire team leader out of the line of fire. Across the terminal, in an office of smoked glass overlooking the sea of travelers, Ms. Evelyn Reed saw only data. At 40, she was the airport's director of operations, a woman who moved with a sharp, decisive energy that matched the constantly updating metrics on her wall-mounted displays. Her world was a symphony of precision: flight schedules, baggage processing times, passenger flow algorithms. Her personal badge of honor was an unbroken streak of 99.4% on-time departures. A military honor procession, scheduled to move through the main concourse at the peak of the afternoon rush, was not a ceremony. It was a chaotic variable, an unacceptable disruption to her perfectly calibrated system. "Unacceptable," she muttered, her eyes narrowing at the blinking icon on her tablet that represented the procession. She tapped it, bringing up the details. The main concourse? During the 1,400-hour push? Who approved this pageantry? Her young assistant, David, hovered nervously. "The airport director, ma'am." It was a request from the Department of Defense. Evelyn Reed's jaw tightened. She zoomed in on the terminal map, her finger tracing an alternative route. "There are service corridors for this. Efficient, out of sight. They lead directly to the ceremonial vehicle access point. Hold them." Now, she looked up from her screen, her expression devoid of emotion. "This airport runs on efficiency, David, not sentiment. We don't stop for parades." Down below, amidst the storm of humanity, Leo stood still, waiting. He could feel the worn edges of the photograph tucked into his inner pocket. It was of him and Liam, arms slung over each other's shoulders, grinning foolishly under a desert moon. His compass. Liam had called him that once. "You're my compass, Hayes. I'll charge the hill, but you make sure it's the right one." The memory was a sharp ache. Today, he was the compass one last time, ensuring his brother's path home was true. The mechanical hiss of the cargo plane's ramp lowering cut through the drone of the nearby jet engines. On the tarmac, a reverent quiet fell over the ground crew, their fluorescent vests a stark contrast to the solemnity of the moment. They removed their caps, heads bowed, as the honor guard emerged from the aircraft's dark interior. Their movements were a study in precision, each step synchronized, each angle perfect. Then, the casket appeared, draped in the vibrant red, white, and blue of the American flag. It seemed to absorb the afternoon sun, a beacon of profound sacrifice against the cold, gray concrete. Leo took his position, his scarlet-trimmed uniform a single flame of tradition in a world of hurried efficiency. The procession began its slow, deliberate march from the tarmac toward the terminal doors, each step a beat in a silent, mournful drum cadence. Just as they crossed the threshold into the main concourse, a figure intercepted them. Ms. Evelyn Reed stood directly in their path, her posture rigid, her face an impassive mask. She held a tablet, clutching it like a shield. Her assistant, David, trailed a step behind, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Sergeant," Reed said, her voice crisp and devoid of warmth. It wasn't loud, but it carried an undeniable authority that made the honor guard pause. "I'm Ms. Reed, Director of Operations. There has been a change of plan." Leo's gaze remained fixed forward, a practice honed by countless hours at the tomb. He did not turn his head, but his voice was clear and steady. "Ma'am, our plan is to proceed through the main terminal as approved. Your approved plan is no longer operationally viable," she countered, tapping her screen. A color-coded map appeared, a thin blue line snaking through the airport's unseen arteries. "I have designated an alternative route. You will take the service corridor on your left. It leads to a maintenance elevator that will take you directly to the ground-level exit. It is faster and will prevent the disruption of thousands of passengers." The phrase, maintenance elevator, hung in the air, an insult wrapped in the language of logistics. The other soldiers in the detail stiffened, their discipline the only thing keeping their outrage in check. Leo's response was immediate and unwavering, his tone respectful but utterly immovable. "Ma'am, this is Corporal Liam Carter of the United States Army. He is a fallen soldier. We will proceed through the main terminal, with full honors, at the appropriate pace for escorting the fallen." Reed took a half-step closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial hiss, as if they were negotiating a cargo shipment. "Sergeant, I understand the need for ceremony, but this is a matter of airport security and efficiency. That corridor," she jabbed a finger toward a sterile, unmarked door, "was designed for precisely these kinds of movements. Ones that shouldn't disrupt the public." "Shouldn't disrupt?" Leo's voice, for the first time, held a trace of hardened steel. He finally turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers. The faint scar above his eyebrow seemed to darken. "Corporal Carter's service and sacrifice were not a disruption, ma'am, and the honor we pay him will not be conducted in secret." "This is not a debate," she snapped, her composure beginning to fray. "The disruption is not temporary. Delays cascade. A 10-minute slowdown here can cause missed connections in Tokyo. We are an interconnected system. The dishonor of hiding a hero in a service corridor would be permanent," Leo replied, his voice dropping back to its calm, implacable cadence. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to the honor guard. They took a single, unified step forward. The procession was moving again, faced with quiet, implacable movement. Evelyn Reed's face flushed with a mixture of disbelief and anger. Her authority, usually absolute within the terminal's walls, had just been ignored. She moved quickly, once again placing herself in front of the casket bearer. "I am ordering you to halt," she said, her voice rising in volume, drawing the attention of nearby travelers. "Under Airport Authority Regulation 7.4, I have the power to redirect any and all non-passenger traffic to ensure operational integrity." She held up her tablet, as if it were a sacred text, the regulation highlighted in yellow. The confrontation was no longer private. A circle of onlookers began to form. A mother pulled her child closer, shielding his eyes. A group of college students lowered their phones, their casual chatter dying on their lips. The atmosphere in that section of the concourse was shifting, the ambient noise giving way to a tense, focused silence. From the gathering crowd, an elderly man in a faded navy blue cap embroidered with U.S. Marine Corps stepped forward. His back was stooped with age, but his eyes were clear and sharp. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a gravelly rumble that commanded attention. "I think you need to take a step back." Reed shot him an irritated glance. "Sir, this is an official airport matter. I buried friends who came home in boxes just like that one." The man, Frank Peterson, continued, ignoring her dismissal. He gestured with his chin toward the casket. They didn't get paraded through the main terminal. They came home to quiet rooms and grieving families. But not one of them, not a single one, was ever taken through the damn back door. That boy earned this walk. Let him have it. His words, raw and authentic, resonated through the crowd. A low murmur of agreement rippled through the onlookers. The tension was no longer just between a soldier and an administrator. It was a conflict of worlds, the cold, data-driven present versus a timeless code of honor. At that moment, a woman pushed gently through the circle of spectators. She was in her 60s, her face etched with a grief so profound it seemed to steal the air around her. She held the hand of a 10-year-old girl with wide, frightened eyes. It was Mrs. Isabella Carter, Liam's mother, and his younger sister, Lily. She stopped a few feet from the casket, her gaze fixed on the flag. She looked at Ms. Reed, not with anger, but with a sorrow that was far more powerful. "That's my son," she said, her voice trembling but clear. As a history teacher, she understood the weight of moments like these. His name is Liam. He loved the smell of gasoline and old leather. He was going to restore a 1969 Mustang with his father when he got home. She paused, gathering her strength, her hand tightening on her daughter's. "He died so that other sons and daughters could come home. He is not non-passenger traffic. He's my boy, and he deserves this honor." The personal detail, the Mustang, was a devastating blow to Reed's sterile argument. It transformed the flag-draped box from a logistical problem into the final vessel of a young man's life and dreams. Lily, clutching her mother's hand, looked up at the casket and whispered a single word that pierced the silence. "Liam?" The crowd's quiet support now felt like a physical presence. The businessman who had been impatiently checking his watch now stood with his head bowed. The college students looked ashamed of their earlier indifference. Ms. Reed was no longer just confronting a stubborn sergeant. She was standing against a mother's grief, a veteran's conviction, and the suddenly awakened conscience of dozens of strangers. But she was a woman who did not back down. Evelyn Reed was cornered, trapped between her unyielding belief in protocol and the rising tide of public sentiment. Her face was a mask of rigid control, but a flicker of desperation showed in her eyes. Logic had failed. Emotional appeals had been levied against her. She had one tool left, the direct application of her authority. "I will have to insist, Sergeant," she declared, her voice hard and brittle. She took a final, decisive step forward, closing the small gap between herself and the procession. Her intention was clear, to physically halt their progress, to reassert her control over the situation in the most tangible way possible. She raised her hand, not in a threatening gesture, but in the imperious way one might signal a vehicle to stop. Her hand moved toward the casket, an instinctive motion to place it on the flag, as if to say, "This goes no further." Her fingers, tipped with perfectly manicured nails, descended toward the deep blue field of stars, about to graze the sacred silk. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Frank Peterson, the old Marine, flinched as if struck. Mrs. Carter closed her eyes, unable to watch. In that frozen instant, Leo moved. It was not an act of aggression. It was an action of pure, honed instinct, as precise and fluid as his 21-step walk at the tomb. There was no anger in the motion, only an absolute certainty. Before her fingers could make contact, his white-gloved hand enveloped her wrist. His grip was not painful, but it was as unyielding as granite, stopping her arm mid-air, inches from the flag. Time seemed to collapse. The ever-present hum of the terminal, the rolling bags, the distant announcements, the quiet conversations, vanished. A pocket of absolute silence formed around the confrontation, so complete it was almost deafening. Leo leaned in, his face still a mask of professional composure, but his eyes burned with an intensity that pinned Reed in place. He spoke in a low voice, barely above a whisper, yet every single person in the hushed concourse heard each word as if it were a thunderclap. Don't touch the flag. The 3 words were not a request. They were not a warning. They were a statement of fundamental law, a truth rooted in centuries of sacrifice. They defined a line that could not be crossed, not for schedules, not for efficiency, not for anyone. Evelyn Reed's face registered a series of emotions in rapid succession. Shock, indignation, and finally, a dawning, terrifying understanding. She was not holding onto a rule book anymore. She had collided with something ancient and unbreakable. She tried to pull her wrist away, but his grip held firm for a long, pregnant second. Then, just as smoothly as he had secured it, he released her. He stepped back into his position, his posture perfect, his gaze once again fixed forward, as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. The line had been drawn, and an entire airport had held its breath as a lone guard stood firm to defend it. The echo of the silence was broken by the sound of measured, confident footsteps approaching. A woman in a sharp, dark blue suit emerged from the crowd. She had an air of command that was instantly recognizable, a calm authority that seemed to lower the temperature of the entire confrontation. This was Anya Sharma, the airport director and a retired Air Force colonel. Her eyes, accustomed to assessing complex situations in seconds, took in the entire scene. The frozen honor guard, the stunned and silent crowd, a pale and shaken Evelyn Reed rubbing her wrist, and at the center of it all, the flag-draped casket and the unwavering tomb guard beside it. She walked directly to her director of operations. Her voice was quiet, containing no anger, only an unchallengeable finality. "Ms. Reed, stand down. Go back to your office." Evelyn started to protest, her training compelling her to defend her actions. "Director, the regulations." "Now, Evelyn," Sharma said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Reed's mouth snapped shut. She gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod, turned, and disappeared into the crowd, her tablet held limply at her side. Director Sharma then turned to Leo. Her expression softened with a deep, knowing empathy. "Sergeant," she said, her voice filled with respect. "My deepest apologies for the interruption. Please, continue when you are ready. You have the right of way." She didn't stop there. She walked to the nearest information desk, took the microphone for the terminal's public address system, and pressed the button. A gentle chime echoed through the concourse. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have your attention, please." Her voice rang out, calm and clear. "Today, we have the solemn honor of hosting a fallen American hero, Corporal Liam Carter, on his final journey home. His procession is making its way through the main concourse." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "As a sign of respect for his service and ultimate sacrifice, I would ask that you please clear a path in the center of the concourse. We ask that you join us, the staff of this airport, in forming a corridor of honor for him and his family." The transformation was immediate and profound. It was as if a spell had been broken. The crowd, no longer passive spectators, became active participants. People who had been rushing to their gates stopped and moved deliberately to the sides. The businessman who had been complaining about delays now stood straight, his laptop bag held respectfully in front of him. Parents knelt, whispering to their children about what it meant to be a soldier. Airport staff, gate agents, coffee baristas, janitors stepped away from their posts and formed lines along the path. The chaotic, sprawling terminal became a solemn, sacred passage. The procession resumed its slow, measured pace. They moved through the corridor of strangers, a silent, human pathway of reverence. Not a single phone was raised to take a picture. The only sound was the soft, rhythmic footfalls of the honor guard on the polished floor. Leo kept his eyes forward, but in his periphery, he could see them all. The tear rolling down a young woman's cheek, the crisp salute from Frank Peterson, the hands held over hearts. As they passed, his gaze briefly met that of Mrs. Carter. No words were needed. In that silent glance, a universe of understanding was shared, a promise kept, a sacrifice honored, a mother's burden shared by a nation of strangers, if only for a few precious moments. Outside, under the vast, open sky, the black hearse waited, its polished surface reflecting the afternoon clouds. The honor guard performed their final duty with heartbreaking precision, placing Corporal Carter's casket gently into the vehicle. The vibrant flag was a final, brilliant farewell against the solemn black. As the honor detail stood back, Leo broke formation and approached Mrs. Carter. He reached into the inner pocket of his uniform and pulled out the worn photograph. Its corners softened from years of being carried close. It was the picture of him and Liam, young and invincible, laughing under a desert moon. He pressed it gently into her hand. "He was my brother, ma'am," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he had suppressed for hours. "I wanted you to have this." Isabella Carter clutched the photo, her fingers tracing Liam's smiling face. Tears she had held back finally brimmed over. But they were not just tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude. "You kept your promise to him, Sergeant," she whispered. "You brought him home right." Lily stepped forward and placed a single, small daisy she had been clutching on the hearse's bumper. "By Liam," she whispered. "You're my hero." A short distance away, a humbled Evelyn Reed approached, her usual confidence gone. She stopped before Leo, her head slightly bowed. "Sergeant," she began, her voice barely audible. I was wrong. I didn't understand. I'm truly sorry." Leo looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he gave a single, slow nod of acknowledgement. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was understanding. The hearse pulled away, beginning the final leg of the journey to Arlington. Leo raised his hand in a slow, perfect salute, holding it steady until the vehicle vanished from sight. That night, back at the tomb of the unknown soldier, Sergeant Leo Hayes walked his watch. Under a sky blanketed with stars, his footsteps echoed in the profound silence. 21 steps. Turn. Pause. 21 steps again. The rhythm was a prayer, a constant, living tribute. The promise he made to Liam was kept, but his greater promise, to honor all those who gave everything, was eternal. In a world that prizes speed, some duties require us to be still. In a system that values efficiency, some traditions remind us of what is truly important. Share this story so that the name Liam Carter and the sacrifice he represents is never forgotten. What does honor mean to you in a world that never stops moving? Let us know in the comments below. Please comment with respect.